morning she blocked him, the lobby still smelled like burned espresso and lemon disinfectant. Daniel Mercer stood just inside the revolving door of the Lakeshore Tower, snow melting into dark half-moons on the marble floor around his shoes. He had not planned to come in. He had told himself he would wait. That patience looked like dignity in his head. It felt like acid in his chest. Across the lobby, Olivia Hart adjusted the strap of her leather tote and pretended not to see him. Her heels clicked too fast. Her shoulders were tight, chin high, the posture of someone rehearsing indifference. Daniel lifted one hand, not a wave, just a signal that he existed. She looked straight through him, thumb moving across her phone. A second later, his screen buzzed in his palm. One short notification. You cannot send messages to this user. Blocked. Right there, 10 feet apart on the same polished floor. The security camera above the reception desk hummed softly, its red light steady. Daniel noticed details when he was hurt. The scuff on the brass directory, the dead plant by the elevators, the faint tremor in Olivia's left hand as she hit the elevator call button. They had built this place together. Not the building itself, but what happened inside it. The non-profit office on the 12th floor, the after-school food program, the donor galas with rented glassware and nervous speeches, 5 years of shared calendars and shared belief. He had written the policies. She had charmed the room. Now she would not even look at him. The elevator doors opened. Olivia stepped in with 2 board members from accounting. She laughed at something one of them said, too loud, a performance. Daniel watched the doors close on his own reflection. Pale. Still, already erased. The receptionist glanced at him with the kind of sympathy reserved for men who had just been left or just been fired. Sometimes, both were the same day. He turned and walked back out into the wind off the lake. His phone felt heavier than it should. He did not call her. He called the bank. The automated system asked for his passcode. He gave it. Calm voice. Careful breathing. The same tone he used when a donor tried to back out of a pledge. He asked for confirmation of the restricted grant account ending in 096. There was a pause. Keyboard clicks. The representative read the balance, then read it again. Slower. It was not supposed to move without 2 signatures, not his, not the board treasurer's. That had been his rule, his boring, cautious accountant father rule. The number had moved, not by a little, by enough to build a new wing at the community center they had been promising for 2 years. Daniel did not raise his voice. He asked for the timestamp of the last transfer. He asked for the authorization method. He wrote everything down on the back of a grocery receipt in his coat pocket. He thanked the woman on the phone. Then he stood on the sidewalk while traffic hissed past and the cold slid under his collar. Olivia had blocked him. But she had not blocked the paper trail. He looked back up at the building. 12 floors of glass and good intentions. Somewhere inside, Olivia was already telling a story where Daniel was unstable, jealous, not a team player. She had practiced that tone lately, soft and disappointed. He could almost hear it. Daniel tucked the receipt deeper into his pocket like it was something fragile and alive. He was not going back in today. He was going to the grocery store, because at 6:30 in the evening, the PTA president shopped at the same place every Thursday, and she still thought Daniel was the nice one. As he started walking, his phone buzzed again. An email notification. From the board, emergency meeting, tonight, without him on the invite list. The grocery store smelled like oranges and floor cleaner. Daniel pushed a cart he did not need, hands steady on the handle, heart moving too fast behind his ribs. He passed displays of discounted cereal and plastic bins of Valentine candy already out even though it was barely January. Ordinary life stacked in bright cardboard towers. He spotted Marissa Coleman near the produce scale, comparing 2 bags of apples like the decision carried moral weight. PTA president, realtor. Knows everything before it becomes official. Daniel took a slow breath and walked over. He did not start with the nonprofit. He asked about her son's science fair project, listened, nodded, laughed in the right places. People told you things when they felt seen. Olivia had taught him that. Eventually, Marissa leaned closer, lowering her voice out of habit rather than necessity. She said she had heard the board was making changes, fast ones. Said Olivia had come to last week's PTA meeting looking pale but determined, like a woman carrying a heavy truth. Daniel kept his face open. Curious. Marissa said there were whispers about financial irregularities, about someone mishandling funds. She did not say his name. She did not have to. Daniel let a beat of silence stretch, then gently asked who had said that. Marissa hesitated, then mentioned a man from the donor advisory circle. Tall, always in navy blazers, talks like he is reading from a grant proposal. Evan Rourke. Daniel felt something cold settle into place. Evan handled corporate partnerships. He had pushed hard for faster expansion. Less paperwork, more trust. Trust was a beautiful word right before it became a weapon. Daniel thanked Marissa for the heads up, framed it like confusion, not defense. He left with a bag of oranges he did not remember putting in the cart. In the parking lot, he sat behind the wheel and pulled out his laptop. The hotspot signal flickered but held. He logged into the shared drive. Access denied. He tried the backup credentials he used for donor reports. Access denied. His name was still on the incorporation documents. His signature still on the original bylaws, but his digital footprint was being erased in real time. Daniel did not panic. He opened a folder on his desktop labeled Archives. His habit of downloading monthly financial snapshots had once annoyed Olivia. Redundant, she had called it. Redundant meant still there. He opened the most recent file. Cross-checked the restricted account balance from 2 months ago with the number the bank rep had given him. The gap was real, clean, deliberate. Then he saw something else. A consulting invoice, large, vague, approved in a batch of routine expenses. Vendor name he did not recognize. He clicked into the metadata, created by Olivia's login, edited once at 3:14 in the morning. Daniel leaned back in the driver's seat. Outside, a cart rolled loose across the asphalt until it hit a curb and tipped sideways. He did not feel angry yet. Anger was hot and blinding. This was colder, sharper. His phone buzzed with a text from a board member he trusted, a retired judge named Leonard who still believed in process. Call me before the meeting. Off record. Daniel glanced at the time. Just after 4 in the afternoon. The emergency meeting would start at 7. He started the engine, heater blasting dry air that smelled faintly of old coffee. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. Still the same face, same man. But now he was carrying something Olivia did not know he had. Proof that did not care who was charming in a lobby. Proof that would still exist long after she finished telling her version of the story. His phone rang. Leonard's name on the screen. Daniel answered. And heard, before any greeting, the tightness in an old judge's voice when he already knew the truth was ugly. Leonard did not waste time on pleasantries. His voice was low, tight, like he was standing in a hallway outside a courtroom where the walls had ears. He told Daniel the board meeting was already decided. The votes were counted before anyone sat down. The agenda was a costume. Daniel kept his hand steady on the steering wheel, eyes on the road, but he felt the pressure behind his eyes like a bruise forming. Leonard said Olivia and Evan were calling it an internal cleanup, a crisis response. They were saying donors were nervous. They were saying the nonprofit needed stability. Then Leonard said the part that made Daniel's stomach go cold. They were preparing to suspend Daniel for financial misconduct. Not investigate, suspend, fast, loud, public enough to satisfy donors. Daniel asked for the evidence they claimed to have. Leonard told him it was not evidence. It was a story. A story about Daniel having too much access. About Daniel being resentful. About Daniel acting erratic after being pushed out of leadership meetings. Daniel felt the word pushed out hit like a shove to the chest. Olivia had not pushed him out. She had erased him. Leonard told him there was one more thing. Evan had been calling board members privately, offering a solution. A new compliance consultant to stabilize operations. A new vendor, a new contract. Daniel thought about the late-night invoice. The vendor name he did not recognize. He asked Leonard who would authorize a vendor contract without board approval. Leonard paused, then said quietly, "Olivia." She had been signing things under emergency authority, claiming time sensitivity. Daniel's mind moved through the bylaws like a man flipping through a map in the dark. Emergency authority existed, but it was narrow. It required documentation. It required notification. Leonard did not sound like a man who believed those requirements had been followed. Daniel pulled into a side street and parked. Snow piled in dirty ridges along the curb. He watched a couple hurry across the street with a bag of takeout held close to their chest. Ordinary life, still moving. Daniel asked Leonard what he should do. Leonard told him to stay calm, to get counsel, to document everything. Then Leonard added one more sentence, the kind that carried more weight than a lecture. "They will try to provoke you into looking guilty." Daniel thanked him. Hung up, sat still. For a long moment he let himself feel it, not the rage, the grief. He had built a compliance structure because he believed in the work, in feeding kids who were quietly hungry and keeping families from falling off the edge. He had written policy language like it was a promise. Now, those same policies were being used as stage props to frame him. Daniel opened his phone and pulled up the grant documents stored in his email archive. Restricted funding did not just come with money, it came with rules. It came with trigger clauses, audit clauses, reporting deadlines. He searched for the biggest grant, the one they celebrated at the last gala when Olivia cried on stage and donors stood up like they were watching a movie. He found the section titled Compliance and Reporting. Then his breath caught. Whistleblower protections. Not the generic kind. Strong language. Specific reporting channels. Clear non-retaliation terms. A requirement to notify the grantor immediately if there was credible concern of misuse. Daniel felt his heartbeat slow, not because he was calmer, because the path in front of him sharpened. If Olivia and Evan were moving money, that clause was not a threat. It was leverage, legal leverage that did not depend on Daniel's reputation. He took screenshots, saved them to a folder labeled Personal. Then he called an attorney. He did not call someone flashy. He called a woman named Nora Klein, who specialized in nonprofit governance and donor compliance. He had met her once at a training seminar where Olivia had rolled her eyes at the boring legal slides. Nora answered on the third ring. Daniel kept his voice controlled. He explained the restricted account discrepancy, the loss of access, the emergency meeting, the plan to suspend him. The invoice created at 3:14 in the morning. Nora listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, there was a short silence. Then Nora told him to come in immediately. Daniel drove across town, passing the school pickup line at Desert Willow Elementary. Cars idled. Parents stared at their phones. A crossing guard held up a gloved hand like she was stopping the whole world. Daniel watched a child climb into a minivan, face flushed from running, backpack bouncing. He thought about how easily a good life could be disrupted by one adult choosing the wrong kind of power. At Nora's office, the lobby was smaller than Lakeshore Tower, but the air felt cleaner. Paper and coffee and quiet authority. Nora met him at the door herself. She did not offer him comfort. She offered him strategy. She told him to stop thinking of this as a personal betrayal. Start thinking of it as governance failure with financial risk. Daniel sat in a chair that creaked faintly. He handed her the banknotes, the timestamps, the screenshots. Nora scanned the whistleblower clause and nodded once. Slow. Then she asked the question Daniel had been trying not to ask himself. Do you have anything that shows intent? Daniel thought of the camera in the Lakeshore lobby, the red light, the way Olivia's hand trembled, the way Evan always stood too close when he talked. Daniel said there was a security camera. It would have captured Olivia blocking him. It would have captured who she was with. It would show the timeline. Nora leaned forward. Then she told him something that made Daniel's throat tighten. If you get that footage, do it fast. Most buildings overwrite in days, sometimes in hours. Daniel stood up so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Outside, the sky had turned to the color of old steel. The city lights flickered on like someone slowly admitting the day was over. Daniel walked to his car and opened his phone. He called the building security desk at Lakeshore Tower. A man answered with a tired voice. Daniel asked for the security manager by name. A man named Carl, who used to joke about Daniel's boring tie on donor days. There was a pause, then Carl's voice came on the line. Careful now, no jokes. Carl said he could not release footage without authorization. Policy. Daniel told him he understood. Then Daniel said he would be back in 10 minutes with legal counsel on speaker. Carl did not say yes, but he did not say no. He said one sentence, low enough to feel like a warning and an invitation at the same time. If you want it, come now. The system cycles tonight. Daniel drove like the road was a narrow bridge and the water underneath was hungry. He parked in the same spot near Lakeshore Tower, the same dirty ridge of snow along the curb, and walked in with his phone already connected to Nora on speaker. The revolving door spun slowly, and the lobby looked almost peaceful. The marble shone. The directory gleamed. The receptionist's nails were a glossy neutral color. Daniel could have been there for a meeting, for a job interview, for coffee. Instead, he was there to keep himself from being erased. Carl met him near the security desk, eyes flicking from Daniel to the speakerphone. Carl looked like a man who had learned to survive by staying out of other people's storms. Nora's voice came through crisp and professional. She introduced herself. She cited Daniel's legal interest as an officer in the organization, his documented concern of misuse of restricted funds, and the need to preserve evidence relevant to governance. She asked for the footage window between 8:30 and 9:15 that morning. She specified the cameras: lobby wide angle, elevator bank, entry door. Carl shifted on his feet. He said the building required a written request, a formal process. Authorization from property management. Nora did not argue. She did not threaten. She calmly stated that if footage was overwritten after a preservation request, the building could be exposed to allegations of spoliation. Carl swallowed. He looked toward the management office door. Then he said he could export the clip as a temporary preservation. Not release, just preserve. He could give Daniel a confirmation that the footage was archived pending formal request. Daniel felt a flicker of relief that lasted 1 second. Then Carl added the part that made the relief collapse. He said there was a problem. The lobby camera had been obstructed earlier, not fully, but enough, for about 8 minutes. Daniel's pulse kicked. Obstructed, how Carl explained that someone had placed a tall floral arrangement near the reception column, right in the line of sight. It looked decorative, like something for a photo moment. It blocked a section of the frame. Daniel pictured Olivia in a charity gala dress, smiling for donors near the same column. That spot was used for pictures, for optics. Nora's voice sharpened. She asked who authorized the arrangement. Carl said it was requested by the nonprofit office. A delivery, signed in under Olivia Hart's name. Daniel's jaw clenched. Olivia had planned, not just reacted, planned. Carl led Daniel into the security room. Monitors glowed in the dim space. The hum of equipment filled the air like a mechanical heartbeat. Carl clicked through timestamps. The footage showed Daniel entering the building. It showed the revolving door. It showed him standing near the directory. It showed Olivia across the lobby, her body angled away, her phone in her hand. Then Olivia stepped into the blind spot behind the floral arrangement. Daniel watched himself raise his hand, watched Olivia's head turn, watched her disappear from view for a moment. Carl clicked forward. The camera still caught the elevator bank, and that mattered. In the reflection of the elevator doors, Daniel saw movement. Not clear faces, but bodies. Olivia stepping close to someone. A man in a navy blazer. Evan. They were not talking like co-workers. They were huddled, close, private. Then a smaller detail snapped into focus. Evan handed Olivia something, thin, rectangular, like an envelope or a folder. Olivia tucked it into her tote. The timestamp sat in the corner of the screen. 8:51 a.m. Daniel's throat tightened. That was before the board email went out. Before the meeting invite, before the bank call. It was premeditated. Nora spoke through the phone, voice calm but firm. She told Carl to export the full segment and preserve it immediately. All camera angles. Elevator reflections included. Carl nodded and began the process. Daniel watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. He felt like he was watching his own life being copied before someone deleted the original. When the export finished, Carl printed a preservation confirmation. He signed it. He stamped it. He handed it to Daniel with hands that did not want to be involved. Daniel thanked him. Carl hesitated, then said one more thing, like he could not hold it in. There had been another request for footage today, earlier. Daniel's skin prickled. Carl said a woman from the nonprofit office came down around noon. She said she needed footage for an internal incident report. She mentioned donor safety. She mentioned a disturbance. Carl said she was calm, smiling. Carl said he refused because she did not have property management authorization. Daniel pictured Olivia's smile, the one she used in front of donors when something behind the scenes was falling apart. Daniel left the security room and stepped back into the lobby. The floral arrangement was gone now. The space looked clean, innocent. His phone buzzed again. Another email, board update, meeting moved to 6:30, attendance mandatory. Daniel could feel the clock tightening around him. Nora told him not to go in unprepared. She told him they would draft a preservation letter to the board and the grantor if necessary. She told him to stop all direct contact with Olivia unless it was documented. Daniel listened, but his eyes kept drifting upward, toward the 12th floor, toward the office where he once believed everyone was on the same side. He walked outside into the cold and sat in his car, holding the preservation document like it was a passport out of a trap. Then his phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. One sentence. "Stop digging or your son will hear what you did." For a moment, Daniel just stared at the message, like the letters might rearrange themselves into something less ugly. His son. The threat was not physical, it was social, reputation, school whispers, the kind of harm that did not leave bruises but still changed how a child walked into a classroom. Daniel swallowed hard. He did not respond. He took a screenshot and saved it in the same folder as the whistleblower clause. Then he called Nora and read it aloud, voice clipped, controlled, refusing to give the threat the satisfaction of shaking him. Nora told him to forward it to her immediately and not engage. She told him threats like that were designed to provoke reckless behavior. Daniel sat in silence after the call ended. Outside, a delivery truck idled, exhaust rising like a ghost. He thought about the pickup line, about how parents glanced at each other, deciding who was safe and who was not, how stories traveled faster than facts. He thought about Olivia showing up at PTA meetings with that soft smile, the one that made people trust her with their donations and their secrets. Then, he thought about the envelope Evan handed her. Paper trail. He started the engine and drove toward the school. Not to confront anyone, to anchor himself. To make sure his child's world stayed steady while adults tried to weaponize it. At Desert Willow, the pickup line was long and slow. Daniel sat behind a minivan with a sticker that read, "Be kind," as if kindness could be printed like a warning label. His phone buzzed with another notification. A calendar invite, not from the board, but from the HOA. Emergency special session tonight. Location, the community clubhouse. He blinked. The HOA had no reason to schedule emergencies unless someone wanted to create noise, unless someone wanted to surround Daniel with neighbors who had half the facts and a lot of opinions. Daniel's chest tightened. Olivia lived in the same neighborhood. Evan had been at their block party last summer holding a plate of barbecue like he belonged there. Daniel began to see the shape of the strategy. Squeeze him. Publicly, professionally, socially, make him look unstable everywhere at once. When his son climbed into the passenger seat, cheeks pink from the cold, Daniel forced his voice to stay warm. His son talked about a spelling test, about a kid who had brought a lizard to show and tell, about Pizza Friday. Daniel listened and nodded and asked the right questions while his mind kept working beneath the surface like a second engine. At home, Daniel helped with homework, heated leftovers, packed a snack bag for tomorrow. Ordinary acts that felt like defiance. Then he dropped his son off at his sister's house with a calm explanation about an adult meeting. His sister, Hannah, looked at him closely like she was reading his face for cracks. She did not pry. She simply said she would keep her phone on. Daniel drove to the community clubhouse for the HOA session. The parking lot was full. Too full. This was not about lawn height or trash bins. Inside, people clustered in small groups, voices low, eyes sharp. Daniel felt them register him. Some offered polite nods. Some looked away. At the front, Marissa Coleman sat at a folding table with a printed agenda. PTA president and HOA secretary. A woman who lived on information like it was oxygen. Olivia was there too. She wore a cream sweater and pearl earrings, dressed like respectability. She did not look at Daniel when he walked in. Evan stood near the refreshments, talking to two neighbors Daniel barely knew. Navy blazer, easy smile, the same posture he used with corporate donors. Daniel felt the room tilt. The HOA president started the meeting. He said there had been a complaint about a disturbance in the neighborhood. Something involving shouting and a threat. Something that made residents feel unsafe. Daniel's stomach tightened. Then the president said the complaint was filed anonymously, but the details pointed to Daniel's address. Daniel heard murmurs. A few people shifted in their seats. Olivia finally looked at him. Her expression was controlled. Sad, almost. Like she had tried so hard and Daniel had forced her hand. Daniel stood slowly. He kept his hands visible. He spoke with a calm that felt borrowed from someone else. He said there had been no disturbance at his home. He said he had been at work, then at school pickup, then at home with his child. He said he would be happy to provide proof of his timeline. Marissa's eyes flicked up, interested. Proof was a word she respected. The HOA president hesitated, flipping through papers. Then Evan stepped forward, voice smooth. He said it was not about one incident. It was about patterns, about concerns, about volatility. Daniel watched Evan's performance like he was watching a salesman pitch fear as a product. Daniel looked around the room. Some neighbors believed Evan because Evan sounded confident. Some believed Olivia because Olivia looked wounded. Daniel understood something in that moment. They did not need everyone to believe. They only needed enough people to doubt. Daniel felt the urge to stand up and expose everything. The bank balance, the timestamps, the camera export, the threat text. But Nora's warning came back. They will try to provoke you into looking guilty. So Daniel did something else. He asked the HOA president for the complaint documentation and the timestamp of submission. He asked who received it. He asked whether the HOA had verified it with any independent source. The questions were quiet, controlled, legal-sounding. The room shifted again, subtle. People liked calm. Calm sounded credible. Evan's smile tightened. Olivia's eyes hardened for half a second before she smoothed them again. The HOA president admitted they had not verified. It had come through an email form, no signature. Daniel nodded once, then he said one sentence, not loud, but clear enough to land. An anonymous complaint does not become truth just because it is printed. He sat back down. The meeting dissolved into procedural confusion. The president promised to review. Marissa looked thoughtful. A few neighbors watched Olivia differently now, like they were seeing the performance seams. As the crowd broke up, Olivia approached Daniel for the first time that day. She stopped at arm's length, close enough for other people to see them, far enough to avoid real intimacy. Her voice was soft, careful, meant to sound reasonable. She told him to let it go. She told him he was embarrassing himself. She told him there were things Daniel did not understand. And Daniel did not answer. He simply watched her face, searching for the moment the mask slipped. Olivia leaned in slightly, smile still on, and delivered her final line like a gift wrapped in velvet. The board already has the footage. Daniel felt his blood turn cold. Footage. Not the lobby camera. Something else. Something they planned to use. Daniel walked out into the freezing night with one thought pounding in his skull. If they had footage, then the camera had rolled somewhere else too. And whatever it showed, they were about to play it for an audience. Daniel did not drive home right away. He sat in the dark parking lot outside the community clubhouse, engine off, breath fogging the inside of the windshield. The HOA lights blinked out one by one behind him, like a stage going dark after a bad play. The board has the footage. Olivia's voice replayed in his head, gentle and deadly. Not the lobby camera. Something else. Something curated. Something designed to look like truth, even if it was only a slice. Daniel took out his phone and called Nora again. He gave her every word Olivia had said, every detail about the HOA complaint, Evan's performance, the room's reaction. Nora listened, then asked the question that mattered. Have you ever raised your voice at the office? Daniel thought carefully, not defensively, accurately. He remembered one heated budget meeting months ago, but it had been about program cuts, not money movement. He had been firm, not volatile. He told Nora no, nothing that would justify an incident report. Nora said then the footage was likely selective. A hallway clip, an audio fragment, something taken out of context. Daniel felt a slow burn of anger now, not wild, but focused. He asked how they could legally use footage without his consent. Nora explained that internal security footage in a workplace could be reviewed by management, but using it publicly or in a defamatory way carried risk, especially if it was edited, especially if it was used to justify removing a whistleblower. Whistleblower. The word felt different now, less abstract, more like armor. Daniel drove home, mind mapping the office layout. The reception desk, the hallway near the conference room, the small donor lounge with the glass wall. Then he remembered something small. 2 weeks ago, he had stayed late to finish a compliance report. Olivia had come back after dinner, saying she forgot her tablet. She had seemed distracted, pacing, texting. At one point, she had stepped into the donor lounge with Evan and closed the glass door. Daniel had not paid attention then. It had not felt relevant. Now it did. He pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment before going inside. He needed to be steady. His son deserved a father, not a storm. After his son was asleep, Daniel opened his laptop at the kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. He searched his email for building maintenance notices. Lakeshore Tower sent alerts whenever systems were serviced. Elevators, HVAC, security. 3 weeks ago, there had been a notice about camera maintenance in common areas, including the donor lounge corridor. Temporary upgrade, higher resolution. Audio capability for incident review. Daniel leaned back slowly. Audio. If there was footage from that night, it might not just show raised voices, it might capture words. Intent. Names. He checked his calendar. That late night had been the same evening the large consulting invoice was created. 3:14 in the morning. Daniel felt the pieces sliding toward each other. If Olivia and Evan had been in the donor lounge that night, near a newly upgraded camera, and if they discussed the transfer or the vendor, the board might have pulled that footage. But boards did not usually dig through security archives without a reason. Someone had pointed them to that night. Daniel opened the archived financial snapshot from the day after that meeting. That was when the consulting invoice first appeared in the system. Timestamp, location, conversation. He forwarded the maintenance notice and the invoice metadata to Nora with a short note. Possible donor lounge audio. Same night as invoice creation. Then he stared at the ceiling, mind racing ahead to the board meeting in the morning. They would play a clip. Olivia would look sad. Evan would look concerned. Daniel would be framed as unstable, maybe confrontational, maybe obstructive. Unless the clip contained something they did not expect him to know. His phone buzzed again. A message from Leonard. "Call me. Urgent?" Daniel stepped into the hallway so his voice would not carry to his son's room. Leonard sounded shaken. He said he had seen part of the footage the board planned to use. A hallway clip. Daniel walking past Olivia and Evan, stopping, turning back. Voices raised. Daniel's voice louder than usual. Daniel closed his eyes, replaying the memory. That had been the night Olivia accused him of slowing things down with compliance reviews. He had pushed back, said restricted funds could not be moved casually. He had said the word audit. Leonard said the clip ended before the key part. Before Olivia said they could route it through the consultant. Before Evan said no one checks if the narrative is clean. "They cut it," Leonard said. Right before that. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. Selective truth. Weaponized editing. Leonard said some board members were uncomfortable but afraid to challenge Olivia without backup. They thought Daniel had been difficult, maybe controlling, maybe paranoid. Daniel asked Leonard one thing. Did the clip have audio? Leonard said yes. Clear, upgraded system. Daniel's pulse quickened. He asked Leonard if the board had seen the full footage or just a segment. Leonard did not know. He said Olivia presented it. Evan supported it. Daniel thanked him and ended the call. He went back to the kitchen table and opened the maintenance notice again. He found the contact email for building security operations. He wrote a short message requesting preservation of donor lounge corridor footage from that specific date and time window, citing legal review. He copied Nora. Then he sat back and looked around his quiet kitchen. A cereal bowl in the sink. A school flyer on the counter. A life built on routines that were never supposed to intersect with this kind of fight. Upstairs, his son turned over in bed, the floor creaking softly. Daniel whispered into the empty room, not as a prayer, not as a promise, but as a statement of fact. You picked the wrong man to frame. His phone buzzed with a reply from the security operations inbox faster than he expected. Footage exists. Pending management approval for release. Daniel stared at the words, heart pounding, mind already moving to the next step. Somewhere in that file was the rest of the conversation they tried to cut. And if he could get it before the board meeting, the story they were building would not just crack, it would collapse. Daniel barely slept. When morning came, the light through the kitchen window looked thin and metallic, like the day itself was holding its breath. He made breakfast for his son, packed a lunch, tied a shoe, signed a permission slip. Ordinary motions that felt unreal, like he was acting in a life that belonged to someone else. At school drop-off, the pickup line from yesterday had turned into the drop-off shuffle. Parents waved, engines idled. A crossing guard blew a whistle that sounded too sharp. Marissa Coleman stood near the entrance with a clipboard, PTA volunteer badge clipped to her coat. She spotted Daniel and gave a small, searching smile. Not warm, not cold, curious. Daniel nodded back. He did not approach her, not yet. He drove straight to Nora's office. She already had 2 cups of coffee on her desk, one pushed toward the empty chair waiting for him. She had read the maintenance notice and the security response. Her eyes were alert, focused, like a surgeon about to operate. She told Daniel they would send a formal litigation hold letter to the building management immediately, copying the nonprofit's council and the board. That would freeze the footage from deletion. Daniel nodded, absorbing the legal language like instructions for breathing. Then Nora told him something else. She had pulled the nonprofit's last filed public disclosure. There was a line item for the consulting firm on that invoice. Same amount, same date. But the description was broader, dressed up. Strategic program assessment. Daniel felt a hollow laugh rise in his throat. Money moved from a restricted grant into a consulting contract, then reported publicly as strategy. Paper trail disguised as process. Nora said if the donor lounge footage captured Olivia and Evan discussing rerouting restricted funds, that was not just internal misconduct. That was potential grant fraud. Daniel let the weight of that settle. Fraud meant outside investigators. It meant the story leaving Olivia's control. His phone buzzed with an email notification from the building management. Subject line, preservation confirmation. The footage was secured. Release pending formal legal request. Daniel felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made him dizzy. The evidence was still alive. Then Nora's assistant knocked lightly and said someone was on the line asking for Daniel directly. The caller refused to leave a message. Daniel took the call. A man's voice, smooth, professional, familiar. Evan. Evan said he just wanted to clear the air before things got messy. He said Daniel was making this harder than it had to be. Daniel kept his tone flat, asked what Evan meant. Evan said the board was prepared to handle this quietly. A resignation framed as a health decision. A small severance, a non-disclosure, clean for everyone. Daniel looked at Nora. She was already shaking her head slowly. Daniel told Evan he was not resigning. Evan's voice lost a shade of warmth. He said Daniel did not understand the damage that would come out if this went public. He said there were clips, emails, moments that could be interpreted in ugly ways. Daniel realized this was not a negotiation. It was a threat disguised as concern. Daniel said one sentence and let it sit between them. Selective clips do not scare me as much as full conversations. Silence on the line, just a breath. Then Evan ended the call without another word. Nora smiled thinly. She said that reaction told them everything. They drafted the preservation demand and the formal request for the donor lounge footage. They cited Daniel's role, the compliance concerns, the whistleblower protections, and the risk of spoliation. By the time Daniel left the office, the sky had cleared to a hard blue, the kind that made the cold feel sharper. He drove to the bank branch this time, not the phone line. He requested printed records for the restricted account movements, with timestamps and authorization method. He asked for the name associated with the login credentials. The manager hesitated but complied when Daniel referenced his officer status and ongoing review. The printout showed the transfer was initiated through the nonprofit's online treasury portal. Two-factor authentication. A device ID he did not recognize. Daniel took a photo of the device ID. He drove next to a small electronics repair shop he had used once when his laptop battery died. A place run by a quiet man who knew more about digital footprints than he let on. Daniel showed him the device ID and asked if it could be traced to a model type. The man said sometimes he would try. Daniel left his number and stepped back out into the cold air. His phone buzzed again. This time from Marissa. She asked if they could talk. Off school grounds. Daniel agreed to meet at the grocery store parking lot after lunch. Neutral ground. Fluorescent lights and shopping carts. When they met, Marissa looked different from yesterday. Less certain. More thoughtful. She said she had spoken with another PTA parent who worked in property management. The anonymous HOA complaint had come from a temporary email address created the same afternoon. Daniel listened without interrupting. Marissa said she did not like being used. Daniel nodded. He told her he did not either. He did not spill everything. He did not mention the footage yet, but he asked if she would be willing to write down what she had observed about the complaint timing. Just facts. Marissa hesitated, then agreed. As they parted, Daniel felt the balance shift slightly. Not a victory, but a crack in the narrative. Back in his car, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number, a woman's voice this time. Soft, nervous. She said she used to work as a temp in the nonprofit office. She said she saw something the night Daniel stayed late, something she had not understood then. Daniel's pulse quickened. He asked what she saw. She said she saw Olivia and Evan in the donor lounge, door closed, lights low. She said she heard raised voices. She said she saw Olivia leave with a stack of folders she did not bring in. Daniel closed his eyes. Witness, independent. He asked why she was calling now. She said someone had contacted her that morning and asked her to sign a statement saying Daniel had been aggressive that night. She said she refused. Daniel gripped the steering wheel as hope and dread tangled together. He asked if she would be willing to speak with his attorney. She said yes, but she was scared. Daniel told her he understood. Then she said one more thing that made the air leave his lungs. She said Olivia had told her the cameras in that hallway had no audio. Daniel looked up at the winter sky, clear and merciless. Olivia had lied, which meant she did not know the system had been upgraded, which meant she did not know what the full recording might contain. Daniel started the engine, heart pounding with a new kind of energy. For the first time since the lobby, he was not just reacting. He was closing in. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. at Lakeshore Tower, conference room 12B. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early, not to make a scene but to make a point. He signed in at reception, calm, polite, documented. Several board members were already inside, coffee cups, tight smiles. The air carried that strained politeness people use when they expect a performance. Olivia sat near the head of the table, posture straight, hands folded. Evan stood by the screen, laptop connected, ready to present. Daniel took a seat without greeting either of them. He placed a thin folder in front of him. Inside were printed bank records, the preservation confirmation for the lobby footage, and Nora's letter invoking whistleblower protections. The meeting opened with formalities that sounded hollow. Then Olivia began. She spoke about stress, about difficult decisions, about the need to protect the organization's reputation. Her voice wavered at the right moments. Her eyes shone, but did not spill tears. Then, she said Daniel had become confrontational and unstable when questioned about financial controls. She said she feared for staff morale. She said she feared for donor trust. Evan took over and said they had security footage from an incident that demonstrated Daniel's behavior. He clicked a key. The screen lit up with the hallway outside the donor lounge. Grainy, but clear enough. Daniel walked into frame. Olivia followed. Evan joined. Voices rose. Daniel's hand cut the air in a sharp gesture. Then the clip ended. Silence in the room. A few board members shifted in their chairs. Leonard did not move. He watched Daniel. Olivia spoke softly. She said this was the moment she realized the situation was untenable. Daniel waited. Let the silence stretch. Then he spoke, voice steady. He asked if the board had seen the full footage. Olivia blinked just once. Evan answered quickly, saying the relevant portion had been shown. Daniel opened his folder and slid the preservation confirmation across the table. He said he had requested preservation of all lobby and corridor footage from that day and from the night of the incident. He said legal counsel had advised him to ensure nothing was deleted. A ripple went through the room. The word legal did that. Daniel continued. He said he also had confirmation that the hallway camera system had been upgraded to include audio capability before that date. Olivia's fingers tightened on the table edge. Evan's jaw shifted. Daniel said if the board had only been shown a silent excerpt, they were missing the most important part. Leonard leaned forward slightly, asked what that part was. Daniel did not answer directly. He turned to Nora, who sat quietly against the wall as observer. She nodded once. Daniel said he had reason to believe the full recording captured a discussion about moving restricted grant funds through a consulting vendor to avoid direct audit flags. The room changed. The air felt thinner. Olivia spoke too fast. She said that was absurd. Mischaracterization. Daniel lashing out. Daniel did not raise his voice. He asked the board to formally request the complete unedited recording from building management, including audio. He said transparency would protect everyone. Evan tried to redirect, saying they could not delay urgent governance decisions. Leonard cleared his throat. He said if there was potential audio evidence related to restricted funds, they had a fiduciary duty to review it before acting. One by one, heads nodded. Not out of loyalty to Daniel, but out of self-preservation. Olivia's mask slipped for half a second. Not anger, fear. The meeting adjourned pending review of the full footage. No suspension vote, no public statement. As people filed out, several board members avoided Daniel's eyes. Not hostile, unsettled. In the hallway, Olivia finally spoke to him directly, voice low and sharp. She said he was destroying everything they built. Daniel answered just as quietly. He said he was trying to stop it from being destroyed for the wrong reasons. Evan stepped between them, smile gone. He said Daniel did not know how ugly this could get. Daniel met his gaze, said he was starting to. Outside the conference room, Daniel checked his phone. A message from Nora. Building management has approved release to legal counsel, audio included. Daniel felt his heartbeat in his throat. The truth was no longer theoretical. It was a file, a recording, a timestamp. Olivia walked past him without another word, heels striking the floor too hard now. Daniel watched her go, then stepped into the elevator alone. The mirrored walls reflected a man who looked tired, but no longer erased. His phone buzzed again before the doors opened at the lobby. A text from the electronics shop. Device ID likely linked to a mid-range business laptop. 2-factor token app installed. Same model your organization issued last year. Daniel stared at the message. Organization issued. Which meant the transfer had likely been made from an internal device. not an outside hacker. The paper trail was tightening. The audio might seal it. As Daniel walked out into the cold morning, his phone rang with a number he did not recognize. He answered. A man introduced himself as a compliance officer from the grant foundation that funded the restricted account. He said they had received an anonymous tip about possible misuse. Daniel looked up at the glass tower behind him, reflecting the pale winter sun. The story had just left the building. The compliance officer's voice was calm, almost gentle, the way professionals sound when they are used to hearing bad news delivered politely. He said the foundation had received a report alleging that restricted funds from their grant had been rerouted through a third-party vendor. He said they were opening a preliminary review. Daniel did not pretend surprise. He did not pretend ignorance. He said he was an officer of the nonprofit and had recently raised internal concerns. He said he welcomed an independent review. The officer asked if Daniel had documentation. Daniel said yes. Bank records, timestamps, internal invoices. He added one more detail carefully. He said there might also be relevant internal security footage that had not yet been fully reviewed by the board. There was a brief pause on the line. Then the officer said they would be issuing a formal document preservation notice to the organization within hours. Daniel thanked him and ended the call. He stood on the sidewalk outside Lakeshore Tower, traffic hissing by, and felt the scale shift. This was no longer a closed circle. It was an investigation with external authority. His phone buzzed again. A message from Nora. Audio file incoming shortly. Daniel got into his car and just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, watching his reflection in the rearview mirror. He had wanted the truth. Now, the truth was about to have a voice. When the email arrived, he did not open it in the parking lot. He drove to a quiet public park by the frozen lake where bare trees stood like witnesses. He parked, facing the water, and opened his laptop. Nora had sent a secure link. Donor Lounge Corridor. Date and time stamped. Daniel clicked play. The video showed the hallway outside the donor lounge first, just like the clip the board had seen. Then Nora's note instructed him to skip ahead 2 minutes to the full interior feed. The angle shifted. Inside the donor lounge, a camera mounted near the ceiling captured the glass table, 2 chairs, and the reflection of the hallway beyond. Olivia and Evan stood close together. Their voices were clear. Daniel heard his own voice faintly in the background at first, speaking about reporting deadlines and audit flags. Then the door closed, and his voice faded. Olivia's tone changed. No longer patient, no longer diplomatic. She said they could not afford another slow quarter. She said donors cared about impact stories, not internal routing. Evan said they just needed to move it once, through the consultant. He said by the time anyone looked, the narrative would be clean. Program assessment. Strategic reallocation. Olivia asked about the restricted language. Evan said foundations rarely dug deep if reporting looked professional. He said Daniel worried too much because Daniel was built for compliance, not growth. Daniel watched Olivia rub her temples, then nod. She said they would have to sideline him, ease him out before he made noise. The words landed like ice water down Daniel's spine, sideline him. Then Olivia said something else, quieter, almost tired. She said she hated lying to him, but the mission was bigger than one person's comfort. Daniel stopped the video. His hands were shaking now. Not with rage. With the weight of hearing your own erasure discussed like a scheduling issue. He closed his eyes, breathed in the cold air through a cracked window, and then played the rest. The conversation moved to details. Vendor name, invoice structure, timing around board reports. Evan said he would handle the consultant paperwork. Olivia said she would manage the board narrative. They spoke about Daniel like he was already gone. When the file ended, Daniel sat in silence, laptop still open, the frozen lake stretching white and endless in front of him. His phone buzzed. Nora. She asked if he had listened. Daniel said yes. His voice sounded far away, even to himself. Nora said they would prepare a formal disclosure package for the board and the foundation. She said the existence of this audio changed the risk landscape dramatically. Daniel nodded even though she could not see him. Then he asked the question that had been building since the first bank call. What happens to Olivia now, Nora did not answer immediately. Then she said consequences in governance cases often came in stages. Internal action, external review, possible civil exposure, sometimes criminal referral, depending on intent and amount. Daniel stared at the lake again. He did not feel triumph. He felt tired. He ended the call and checked his messages. One from Marissa. She said word was spreading that the foundation had reached out to the board. She said people were starting to ask different questions now. Daniel typed back a simple thank you. Then another message came in, from the temp employee who had called earlier. She said she had spoken with Nora and given a statement. She said she felt sick but relieved. Daniel thanked her too. As he closed his laptop, he caught his reflection in the dark screen. A man who had been underestimated, not because he was weak, but because he was quiet. His phone rang again. Leonard. Leonard's voice sounded older than usual. He said the board had just received the foundation's preservation notice. Panic was setting in. Olivia had asked for an emergency executive session without Daniel. Daniel looked out over the frozen water and said calmly that he would attend. Leonard hesitated, then said there was one more thing. Olivia had told the board she had evidence Daniel had leaked internal information to the foundation. Daniel felt the old chill return. They were not done trying to flip the script. And now the next meeting would not just be about money. It would be about motive. The executive session was called for that afternoon. Closed door, board members only, legal counsel present. Daniel arrived with Nora at his side, not as an aggressor, but as a participant with standing. He had insisted on his right to attend as a current officer. Leonard had supported that. The conference room felt smaller than it had that morning. The blinds were half drawn, cutting the winter light into pale stripes across the table. Olivia sat at the far end, hands clasped, expression composed but tight at the edges. Evan was beside her, laptop closed now, no presentation cued. The board chair opened the session with a formal tone that could not hide the strain underneath. He said they had received a preservation notice from the foundation and a formal communication from Daniel's counsel regarding potential whistleblower protections. Then he turned to Olivia. She spoke carefully, voice low. She said Daniel had escalated internal disagreements into external accusations. She said he had breached trust by contacting the foundation without board authorization. She said that action itself showed poor judgment and disloyalty. Daniel listened without interrupting. He had learned the rhythm of this. Let the story be told, then bring the documents. When she finished, he spoke, calm, measured. He said he had not leaked confidential donor information. He had raised concerns about restricted fund movement, which, under the grant agreement, triggered a duty to report credible misuse. He slid a printed copy of the whistleblower clause across the table. He said the foundation's own compliance officer had contacted him first, based on an anonymous tip. He had responded honestly. Murmurs around the table. Not loud, but no longer united. Evan leaned forward. He said Daniel was twisting language to protect himself. He said internal conversations were being reframed as criminal intent. Nora spoke for the first time, voice even and precise. She said they were not discussing interpretations. They were discussing documented financial transfers and recorded conversations. She placed a transcript excerpt on the table. Not the full audio yet. just enough. A line where Evan said by the time anyone looked, the narrative would be clean. A line where Olivia said they would have to sideline him before he made noise. The room went very still. Olivia's face drained of color, then flushed back too fast. She said the transcript was taken out of context. She said strategic language could be misunderstood. Daniel finally looked directly at her. Not with anger, with something heavier. He asked one question. What context makes hiding restricted funds acceptable? No one answered. The board chair cleared his throat. He asked if there was full audio available. Nora confirmed and said it could be shared with the board and the Foundation's investigators under appropriate confidentiality. Evan tried once more. He said intent mattered, that they had been trying to keep programs alive, that sometimes leadership required flexibility. Leonard spoke then, voice firm in a way Daniel had only heard in courtrooms. He said flexibility did not include misrepresenting restricted funds or silencing internal compliance officers. He said the board's duty was not to comfort itself, but to the law and to the people served. Olivia's composure cracked. Not into shouting, into something smaller. She said they had been under pressure, that donors wanted numbers, that delays cost lives, that Daniel's caution felt like obstruction. Daniel felt the old grief again. The version of the mission they once shared. The slow drift into shortcuts justified by urgency. He said quietly that urgency did not excuse dishonesty. He said children deserved food, not falsified reports that would collapse later and take programs down with them. Silence again. The board chair called for a recess so members could review the materials with counsel. As people stood, Olivia remained seated. She stared at the table like it might rearrange into a different reality if she looked long enough. Evan leaned toward her, whispering, but she did not respond. Daniel stepped into the hallway, breathing slow, steady. His phone buzzed, a message from the electronics shop. They had matched the device ID more precisely. The login device used for the transfer had the same serial range as the laptops issued to executive leadership. Daniel closed his eyes. That narrowed the circle to almost no one else. Nora joined him. She said the Foundation's investigators wanted a preliminary call within the hour. Daniel nodded. The process was accelerating now, moving beyond internal politics. Through the conference room glass, he saw board members huddled in small groups, voices low, faces pale. The story Olivia and Evan had built was unraveling in front of them, thread by thread. But Daniel knew one thing. People cornered by truth did not always surrender gracefully. His phone buzzed again. A new message, unknown number, one line. You win on paper, but people remember emotions, not spreadsheets. Daniel stared at it for a long moment, then saved the screenshot with the others. Because in the end, paper trails did not erase emotions. They just made sure lies could not rewrite history. Inside the conference room, the board chair called everyone back to the table. The next decision would not just shape the nonprofit. It would decide who walked out of that building with a future intact. When the board reconvened, the air felt heavier, like the room itself understood that whatever was said next would not be undone. The board chair spoke slowly, carefully. He said they had reviewed the transcript excerpt and received confirmation from building management that full audio and video had been preserved. He said the Foundation's preservation notice created an independent obligation that superseded internal preference. Then he turned to Olivia and Evan. He said that effective immediately. Both of them were being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Access to financial systems would be suspended. External counsel would be engaged. The words landed without drama, but the impact was seismic. Olivia did not argue. She sat very still, hands folded, eyes fixed on a point beyond the wall. Evan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Daniel felt no surge of victory, only a quiet, aching release, like a muscle that had been clenched too long, finally letting go. The board chair continued. He said Daniel would remain in his officer role, but with oversight from an interim compliance committee and external advisors to ensure transparency. Leonard met Daniel's eyes and gave a small nod. Not celebration, acknowledgement. The meeting ended without handshakes, without the usual polite closing phrases. People filed out in silence, carrying folders like they were carrying evidence of their own misjudgment. In the hallway, Olivia stopped beside Daniel one last time. She did not cry. She did not shout. She said she had truly believed she was protecting the mission. She said sometimes leadership meant making hard calls others did not understand. Daniel listened. Then he said gently that leadership also meant telling the truth when it was inconvenient. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, like she was trying to reconcile the man she had sidelined with the one now standing in front of her. Then she walked away. Daniel stepped outside into the cold afternoon. The sky was pale blue, the kind that came after a storm had passed through in the night. His phone buzzed, a message from the Foundation compliance officer. They had received the materials and would coordinate directly with council. Appreciation for his cooperation. Another message from Marissa. She said word had spread that there had been a serious governance issue, not a personal meltdown. She said some parents felt embarrassed they had believed the rumors. Daniel typed back that people believed what they were given. Truth took longer, but it lasted. He drove to pick up his son from school. The pickup line moved slow, familiar. Parents waved. No one stared. The world had not ended. His son climbed into the car and immediately started talking about a reading quiz. Daniel listened, smiling, letting the ordinary sound wash over him like medicine. That evening, after homework and dinner, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table again. The same table where he had first pulled up the bank records. The same clock ticking on the wall, but the weight in the room was different now. Lighter. Not gone, but shifted. He opened his laptop and began drafting a message to staff and donors, with the board's approval. It was not accusatory, it was not dramatic. It said the organization was undergoing a governance review to ensure full compliance and transparency. It reaffirmed commitment to the mission and to ethical stewardship. He paused before sending it, thought about the last weeks, about the lobby, the blocked message, the floral arrangement placed to hide a camera, the whispered strategy to sideline him. He realized something quiet and important. They had underestimated him not because he was powerless, but because he did not perform power the way they did. He pressed send. Upstairs, his son laughed at something on a video. A bright, uncomplicated sound. Daniel closed the laptop and sat back, letting the moment settle. His phone buzzed once more. A message from Nora. You did the hard part. Now let the process do its job. Daniel typed back a thank you. Then he stood, turned off the kitchen light, and headed upstairs. He paused at his son's door, listening to the steady breathing inside. Quiet strength did not look dramatic. It looked like this. Showing up. Doing the right thing even when it was slow and lonely. Downstairs, the house creaked softly as the heat kicked on. Outside, the neighborhood was still, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something close to poos. The investigation unfolded in weeks, not days. External auditors came in with neutral faces and long checklists. They asked for logs, emails, contracts, board minutes. They spoke in measured tones that left little room for charm or spin. Daniel cooperated fully, answering questions, handing over documents, sitting through interviews that forced him to relive moments he would rather forget. Olivia and Evan retained separate counsel. They issued statements about complex decisions made under pressure. They avoided direct admission but stopped denying the existence of the transfers once the documentation was laid out in sequence. The foundation temporarily froze part of the grant until the review concluded, but they did not pull out entirely. That mattered. Programs continued. Kids still got meals. The mission, battered but intact, kept breathing. At a special board session a month later, new financial controls were adopted. Dual authorization tightened. Independent compliance oversight formalized. Transparency protocols expanded. The kind of boring safeguards Daniel had always argued for were finally embraced without eye-rolling. Leonard thanked Daniel privately after the meeting. He said courage and governance often looked like stubborn paperwork and uncomfortable questions. He said he hoped Daniel would not lose that instinct. Daniel smiled faintly. He had almost lost it once, worn down by being told he was slowing things down. Now he understood that speed without integrity was just a faster way to fall. At home, life settled into familiar rhythms again. School projects, grocery runs, Saturday mornings at the park. One afternoon at the grocery store, Marissa caught up to him by the oranges again. She said the PTA was planning a fundraiser and asked if he would help review the budget. Daniel laughed softly, said he would be happy to. Word traveled differently now, not as gossip, but as a cautionary story about oversight, about asking questions before assuming. Olivia eventually resigned formally as executive director. The announcement cited personal reasons and a transition period. It did not mention the investigation, but those who needed to know knew. Daniel did not celebrate her fall. He carried a quiet sadness about how far things had drifted before anyone stopped them. One evening, months later, he drove past Lakeshore Tower and almost did not recognize the feeling in his chest. It was not dread. It was distance. The building was just glass and steel again, not a battlefield. At a board retreat, the new interim director asked Daniel to speak about the compliance culture. He stood in front of the group, hands in his pockets, and spoke plainly. He said strong missions do not need secret shortcuts. He said trust is built on truth told early, not excuses made later. He said the goal was not to avoid scrutiny, but to deserve it. People listened, really listened. That night, back at home, Daniel tucked his son into bed. His son asked why grown-ups sometimes lied. Daniel paused, choosing words that a child could hold. He said sometimes people are afraid of losing something and fear makes them choose the wrong way to protect it. But he added that telling the truth even when it is hard keeps things from breaking later. His son nodded, satisfied with the shape of that answer, and rolled over. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's breathing. In the quiet hallway, he let himself think one last time about the lobby, about the day he was blocked like he was already gone, about the red camera light that never stopped recording. The truth does not always shout. Sometimes it just waits, patient, in a file no one thought to check. Daniel turned off the light and walked back down the hall. In the kitchen, his phone buzzed with a notification from the nonprofit social page. A post about the new community center wing finally opening next spring. Funding secured the right way. Daniel smiled to himself. Self-respect is not loud. It is the steady choice to stand on what is right, even when it costs you comfort. Family, he realized, is built the same way. On honesty, on showing up, on protecting what matters without losing yourself in the process. He set his phone down and looked around his quiet home. If you were in Daniel's place, would you have stayed silent to keep the peace, or risked everything to tell the truth? He hoped people would answer honestly. If this story made you think about trust, power, and doing the right thing when it costs you, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Daniel's place? Would you protect your peace or protect the truth? Your perspective might help someone else who is facing a quiet battle of their own.